Okay, so today what I want to do is sort of odds and ends, but I'll begin by a continuation of what we were working on yesterday with the appearance panel and show you just briefly a couple of things that I like to do. In addition to that, they started talking about graphic styles and hold on here. Yeah, graphic styles and effects and that sort of thing. And, you know, if you don't hunt and peck through all of this and kind of explore, there's some really nice ones that you might miss. And I wanted to show you a couple of those. So it's sort of more of a show and tell, not really new information. Well, there is one that will be, there will be two that are new. One is a perspective tool that they used to have a lesson for that, and they've omitted it, deprecated it from the textbook. That can be helpful from time to time. The other one goes back to a couple of lessons ago when we were doing gradients. And this would be the mesh tool, the gradient mesh. But since they've made improvements to the gradient tool, the gradient mesh I think is really sort of unnecessary. But I'll show it to you just the same. Okay? So I'm going to switch to just a non-blank screen at the moment. I want to make sure that I have my appearance panel up, and I will be using swatches. There we go. So I'm just dragging them off just so that I have them here. Go ahead and make a simple rectangle. Default white fill, black stroke. Okay. So let's go ahead and increase the size of the stroke a little bit. Maybe, 10 point, really big fat one. And then I'm going to go ahead and switch to the fill. And let's start with something that we did the other day, but I'm going to go ahead and make it maybe a green fill, like so. Now, what we've done so far up until this lesson is that that's pretty much it. If I wanted to apply a gradient or a pattern to that, if I wanted a broken line, if I wanted a solid line or no line, you could do that. But you should understand now that you can add as many as you want. So for example, let me go ahead and start with a fill. And this is something that we sort of did yesterday. The way that I like working with this is just go ahead and I'm going to duplicate it just by clicking and dragging here. So I have two. Think of these appearances like layers, one stacked on top of one another. So I have two green fills, one on top of the other, but instead of a green fill, I'm going to switch to the pattern. Okay. And you can see that because part of the pattern is transparent, it's allowing the background or the initial green fill to show through. Now, what if we wanted to add another one on top of that? Well, I could go ahead and I could make a copy of this again. But instead of this one now, I'm going to add another one. So here's another one with adding transparency and a black background. And all of this is contained within the fill of one stroke. And that's pretty cool. And let's do the same with the strokes. Let's go ahead and build those up. So right now I have 11 point. I'm going to build that all the way up to maybe 20, just for the heck of it. And remember, and this is something that I forgot the other day when we were doing the wheel, is that you can control whether you want the alignment to be the normal, divided, centered. You want to be on the inside or the outside, and each of these strokes can be separate. So let me just leave them on the inside, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this again. So I'll go ahead and click and drag, and I'll make a copy of it. And now this one, maybe I'll make it instead of 10, let's try 10 just for the heck of it. And I'm going to change the color of it. And let's make that orange. Okay. So now you can see an orange fill on top of that. So maybe that's a little bit too much. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe make that 5 instead. There you go. And then we could also add another one on top of that. Maybe if I wanted a yellow line on the inside. So I could go ahead and I could duplicate this again. Let's go ahead and make this one a yellow line. And remember, because this is the same width as the one previous, it just overlays just like it would on a layer. But I will make this one a little bit less. I'll make it maybe 2 points. And then I'm going to change the stroke and I'm going to make this one on the inside. So if we zoom in a little bit, look at how complex I'm making the path. And the only way you can do this is with the appearance panel. Okay. And again, we can control the opacity of each of these individual appearances separately, or you can control the appearance of an entire path. You know, you can really get some amazing results that in the past, before they had the appearance panel, before you could do this, if you wanted this, you would have to make copies of each of these paths and paste them on top or behind one another and duplicate them and then maybe group them and that sort of thing. And it was really difficult, you know, to keep track of all of the shapes and that sort of thing. And now when you just, you know, anytime you select, you know, the object and you have your appearance panel visible. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna, since nothing is selected, I can go ahead and I can clear the appearance from here, but it doesn't, because this was deselected, it doesn't clear it from there. But anytime you go back and you just select the path, the entire group of appearances appear. Now, in addition to that, one of the things that we covered the other day, let me move the swatches over a little bit, is that we had some graphic styles. So this should be, here are our graphic styles. So let's say I wanted to apply this group of appearances to other objects. Well, all I have to do is zoom out a little bit here. Take this object and just drag it into the graphic styles. And notice that it's added to that. So now what I can do, let me go ahead and if I delete this, and I want to go ahead and clear this. And let's go ahead now and bring up, we'll make an ellipse just for the heck of it. Okay, no properties. But if I wanted to reuse all of those settings that I had created just a moment ago, then you just click there and voila. They've all been applied. And you can go back in and you can edit them. So I can, with the appearance panel, I can edit and I can drag this in and I can make a separate appearance. Or if you hold down, if I remember correctly, the Option key and drag this on top of the old one, then it will replace it. Okay. So, you know, I think these are really, really nice settings. So that's what I wanted to kind of show you here. It's a little bit differently than the way the book did it, but it is and it isn't. It helps when you are the one building the illustration, then you have a pretty clear idea of, you know, what you've done, whether you've used paths on the inside, outside, that sort of thing, and you have that all in your kind of RAM, you know, your temporary memory that you can easily manipulate. But when you're working from someone else's, it's kind of hard to remember what they're doing. So the next thing that I wanted to do, and again, we have these graphic styles up, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to use some text. And I did this the other day. I used my name, but I'll just use my first name and that's it. Okay. And I want to make it a little bit larger, but I wanted to show you the 3D, some of the effects using 3D. And we really didn't get into it that much. I showed you some, some of the default ones, but how you can go in and you can edit them. So I'm going to go ahead and let's use Arial Black. That's not a bad one. And let's change the size and make this nice and big. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by using one of the 3D effects from here. Okay. And it doesn't matter which one I choose. Let's go ahead and choose this one. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and let's move that and come back here. And why is it doing that? Let's select that again. Let's select this again. No. Maybe because, let's go back here. So no appearance has been applied. So let's try this again. How about a different one? Let's try this. Without selecting the text, I think that was my mistake. There we go. If you select the text, it doesn't work. So here's one. If you want this one, that could be kind of cool. But what if you want to embellish this a little bit? So what I could do with a stroke is I could go ahead and even though this is from the 3D effects library, I could go ahead and I can pick a different color here.
Would you also mind changing the interpreters?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hold on one sec. Let me let's go here and go to panels. And now you need Bernice, right?
Right.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The question has been asked by Susie. Can you use the appearance on more complicated shapes? Like the one, oh yes, absolutely. They can be applied to any shape. These are just simple samples of, ellipses, squares, whatever. But no, it doesn't matter. They can be applied to any shape at all. Yeah, no, good question. Okay. Okie doke. So, maybe I like this look. It's sort of a Superman look, we got going here. But I want to change the orientation of my name. And maybe I don't want the depth of the extrusion to be quite so much. Well, if I bring up the appearance panel, many of these, I think, effects are good places to start. And then you can go back and edit them. But you'll notice that we have warp. And we also have down here that the warp was added to get the curve. And I like the curve, but I need to change the perspective of the extrude and bevel. And again, that can be found under effects, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select extrude and bevel. That's going to bring up a dialog box. And if everybody can see, you can see that this is the angle of the rotation in a 3D world. You can also see the extrude depth. So as I said, maybe instead of 50 points, I only want it 25. So I'll select 25. But the thing that you have to remember is that this tool really can bog down your computer a lot. So have the extrusion, and not only do you have extrusion and bevel, is that you can also, there is another feature called Lathe. I don't recommend it, but it is available. So, now I've changed the depth of that. And the depth of that is based on the stroke that I have, making it visible. If I turned off the stroke, then it just looks three-dimensional. So I'll do that in a second. But let's say I want to change the angle of this. So I just move this from here, like so. Let's do it like so. So maybe this is the look that I'm going for. You know, or I want this to be more straight on and maybe looking up a little bit like so. So I can also move it directly from, you know, put in the specific angles and the perspective here. And if I like that, just click OK. And there you go. Kind of cool, huh? So again, watch what happens when I turn off the stroke. It has a 3D appearance, but that, you know, outline goes away. So if that's the look I'm going for, I can do that. Likewise, one of the things that I didn't show you is that you can control, if we look, let's see, we can control more options. That's what I wanted. We can control the lighting. So we have a front light, you know, we have these additional lights, and these can be moved around. You can control the intensity of the light. You can control ambient light, the highlight intensity, the number of blend steps, all these things. So there's, you know, all of these hidden features that are available to you. Okay. So let me go ahead and cancel that. Let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these, and then I want to show you another feature. This is related to some of you wanting to distort type, and that can be kind of cool. So I'm going to remove the bevel, and 3D Extrude and Bevel. I'm just going to throw that in the trash. Come on, select it. So that's gone. Okay. And if I want to remove the warp, I could remove that. Or if I want to turn it off, I got that. Okay. So all of these are continually editable. Now, what if I wanted to do something a little bit more dramatic than just using the warp feature? Because remember, if you click here, you have, you know, arc lower, you have the arc, you have upper arc, you have the shell, you have a whole bunch of these. Okay. So, but for our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove it all together. I've turned it off. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take this, I'm going to remove that just for the heck of it. So that's gone. And now what I want to do is I want to use a mesh to distort this. And to do that, we would have that under Effects. Okay, and we have Distort and Transform. We have that. We also have Warp. Okay, those are the ones that we have. These are all editable. Okay. What I want to do though instead is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the type. And if you weren't aware of this, some of the features that you can't do to type, what I do is I just make a copy of it first by holding down the Shift key and copy. And then if I want to treat this just like any other shape, I select the shape and I go to Type and I select that I want to outline. Let's see, where is it here? Create outlines. So this is no longer editable text. It's just like any other shape that you would make, you know, if it was an ellipse or a rectangle or whatever. But now what I'd like to do is I'm going to go to Object. And what I want to do is I want to go to Envelope Distort. And I'm going to say Make with Mesh. Okay, not with a warp, but with a mesh. And now you determine how many rows and how many columns you want with the mesh. You see that appear like so with the preview. So I'll click OK. And let's zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. And now what we can do, and you can really go crazy with this, is that you can take each of these intersections, these anchor points, and I can use the direct selection tool. Let's go ahead and select. And I can begin to distort this, like so. And watch what happens. Okay, so this is kind of a free form distortion. And if you have a particular shape that you want the type to configure to, and it's not applied just to type, but it's used extensively with type. This would be a nice thing to do. So again, that's the envelope distortion. But again, it won't work with editable text. You have to first create outlines to convert it to paths, and then you have this to work with. Okay, so that's another kind of fun feature. Okay, so let's leave that as is for a moment. Let's see what we have. One of the other things that I talked about, we had worked with gradients the other day. So if I select this, let me see if I can do it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the mesh tool. And before I, no, I'm going to not do that there. I'm going to, because I might goof this up. I'm just going to use a basic shape, and then we'll work with that. So let's go ahead and deselect. Just to show you, it's similar to the mesh, but it's applying color to it now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a simple rectangle, like so. And I'm going to go back to the default fill and stroke. So, and then maybe I will fill it with a color. I'll just fill it with pink or something. Okay. Now, similar to what we had when we selected the gradient tool before, remember we had this brand new option over here. It's the freeform gradient. That is a new feature. And prior to using the freeform one, we had to use the gradient mesh. And the freeform gradient is much superior to the gradient mesh. But what I can do is I can either click here and I can begin to click. And wherever I click, we have an intersection. And at those points of intersection, I can change the color. Another way of doing that is that if you want it uniform, we can go to Object and we can go to Gradient Mesh, create Gradient Mesh. And similar to the distortion that we had below here, you can determine the number of rows and columns that you want. So I'll just stick with the default. And now we can come back in with the direct selection tool. And again, we can highlight each one of these. And now we can pick a different color. So it's like, but now with the freeform gradient tool, it kind of makes this silly and unnecessary, because now in order to move these, you have to kind of click and drag, and you can also twist these little handles. But this was how you would create realistic gradients in the past for modeling form prior to the freeform gradient tool. You can always remove, if I select a point here, I can always select it and remove it. I don't want all of it. I just want, we can go ahead and, let me hold down. There we go. I just want that one, so no, I don't want to remove all of them. The other downside to using this gradient mesh is that once the shape has been converted to a gradient mesh, it's a done deal. It's you can't fill it with a regular gradient or anything anymore. It has been converted into a mesh. So it would be worthwhile if you do use the gradient mesh to make a copy of the shape first. And it is, again, it's not restricted to rectangles or circles or anything. It can be any shape you want. Okay. Again, if you click and hold down, and now if I hold down the control key, notice that it slides across like so. And if I hold, let's see, I want to duplicate. I want to, yeah, see, it's been so long since I've used it, I've forgotten. But you can remove some of these paths if you want and add others. It's just that with the new tools, it really makes it kind of unnecessary now. So that was the other thing that I wanted to introduce. One of the other things that I want to introduce, so let me zoom out of here a little bit. Select all, and I'm going to delete, is the perspective tool. Perspective tool is found, if I can find it over here, right here. So if I click on that, we can get a perspective grid.
Professor, before you start, could you switch the interpreters?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So let me close the appearance panel so you can see how this works. And I'll leave swatches up just so that we can do this. So you'll notice that here is a grid for 2-point perspective. And we can control the height. So I can control vanishing point 1 and 2. I can bring this in like so, or I can pull it out. Okay. We have the grid along the floor. We have a number of things that we can change. You not only have 2-point perspective available to you, but you have 1 and 3. But per project, you should really only use one of the grids. So if I go to view, this is where you'll find the other ones. And if I go to perspective grid, if I would rather use a 1-point, I can switch like so. So there's my 1-point perspective. And again, all of these, their eye level, can be changed. For all of these, you can move the vanishing point if you want. It can be over here like so. All of these features can be edited and changed. Another one that's available, as I said, there's the 1-point, 2-point. Let's go to view again. And under perspective grid, we can have 3-point. Whoops, I didn't select it. I can go to view, perspective grid, 3-point. There we go, normal view. So let's move this up. Let me zoom out a little bit. And let's take from here, remove the whole thing up. So imagine, if you were, I don't know how many of you have had a drawing class that has covered perspective, but this would be as if you were on a tall skyscraper and you were at the very top and you were looking down. You could always change that, if you wanted to, if you're on the base of a hill and looking up at, a haunted house, and you could look at it from that perspective too. It's working better from here though. Let's see if we can do that. We could change the grid like so. Okay, so depending on the grid that you want, I'm going to go back to the 2-point. So let's go back to view, and you can create your own too and save them once you have modified them. So let's go back to the normal 2-point perspective like so. And you'll also notice in the upper left-hand corner, this little widget here. And we have the left is blue, the right should be orange, and the bottom should be white. There we go. The right should be orange, and the bottom should be blue. So let's say, for example, I wanted to draw an ellipse in perspective on this left side. Then I could take my circle tool, like so. And if I begin to draw it, and let's hold down the Shift key, as the Shift key constrains the proportions, notice that it draws that circle in perspective. And now, if I pull this off, like so, where my perspective, there we go. We have these other options here. I'm gonna go ahead and pull that off. So now if I select this like so, and I move it back in perspective, let's go back and select like so. Notice that as it moves back in space, or if I bring it forward in space, it remains in perspective. Okay. And these are layered, just like you would have with any other object. So you'd need to pay attention with your layers panel. Anyway, one of the other things that we would have here, let me go ahead and show you just making a simple box in perspective, is that I could come back up here. Let's take this. Let's go back to the perspective tool. Let's pull this down. And the grid allows you to, each one of these units of the grid could represent an inch, a foot, a mile, whatever works for you. Okay. And I can change the eye level here. Let's move that back down. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw using the rectangle tool. Let's go ahead and switch to the right side. And I can click and drag. Notice that it's drawing my rectangle in perspective. And now I can switch to the left side. I can pick another color. Let's go ahead and pick a darker color. I can click and drag. And notice how it's drawing it in perspective. So if I'm making a house, or if I'm making anything in perspective, a product, and I come back to the right side again, and maybe I want to make a little door or something over here. Okay, so here's the door, and this is really very crude, but you get the idea. Here's the door in my building. And let's say I wanted to create some type that, a sign on here that was in perspective. Well, this is one of the nifty features, is that if you create your object in 2D first, then you can drag it in perspective. So once I'm outside of the perspective mode here, then I can go ahead and, let's say, for example, I'll use the type tool. And I'm going to click here, and we'll just say, there's Kmart. Got that? Now we can go back to perspective, and we can go, let's say I want it to be on the right side, and if I click here and I drag it, notice it just put that in perspective. Pretty cool, huh? So it does have its uses. It can be very useful, and it does take a little bit of time to get acclimated to it. But if you're really interested in doing detailed 3D modeling, and you want things to be in perspective, and you want the lighting to be right and that sort of thing, then a 3D modeling program would be really your best choice. At Cerritos, we use Lightwave, but there are many other programs. They're for free. There's Blender and that sort of thing. That will give you a better effect. But if you're designing, doing package design in Illustrator, and you want a two-dimensional kind of stylized graphic approach, then this would be as good as any to do something like that. Okay. So those are some of the things that I wanted to show you, kind of a shortened, truncated lecture today. Is there any of this that you want? Do you want me to expand on any of these, or is it find any of this useful? Okay. No. That's really all I wanted to cover today. And just a reminder, next week is our last week. So work hard on, if you still have to finish your Tokidoki, skateboard assignment, get that done. Make sure that you're caught up on lessons. We still have 2 more lessons to do. We're going to do 13 and 14 next week. I might, no, I don't want to say anything yet. We'll wait until next week. And then we have the final project. I will grade the assignment, the skateboard assignment tomorrow. And then after the last day, I'll tabulate all of the lessons that you've done. And if you've done them all, you get 10 points and so on and so forth. Okay. No questions from anybody? No? Yeah, see, once I move that perspective, then the underlying shape is messed up. I do have a couple, okay. Yeah, let's see, for Emily, I'm gonna go ahead and answer live. It says, are all the lessons due the last day? Yep. And to be perfectly honest, if you turn them in on Friday, I probably won't do any grading until the weekend. And really all the grading on Canvas is automatically kind of tabulated. So if you need an extra day, just, let me know and that will be okay. And then Susie, let's see, what did you have? Can you go over where to find the perspective tool? It's not, okay, I will show you. So let's go ahead and do that. The perspective tool. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and sometimes people activate it by mistake. So I'm going to go ahead and go back, and you'll notice that that grid remains. But I'm going to go ahead under view, and I'm going to go down to perspective grid, and I'm going to select hide grid, so that goes away. And I'm going to select everything, and I'm just going to delete it. Boom, it's all gone. So you should have, it should be over here. It should look like this. What is underneath it? You don't see that little tool? No. Let me go back up here. And I have Essentials Classic selected. And I'll go ahead and reset Essentials Classic. And it should be right here below the Shape Builder tool. So as soon as you click on it, the grid appears. So if you select this by accident and the grid shows up and you can't get rid of it, the only way you can get rid of it is to go back up to view, select perspective grid, and then select hide grid or Shift Command I. And then if you want to change, if you would rather have a 1-point grid or a 3-point grid, then you select from here. And then as you customize it, you can also save grid as a preset. So you can save your own grids. So if you decide you want the vanishing points to be farther apart, you can do that. There's another nifty feature too in here that if I come back up to view and I go to perspective grid, what we can do is we can lock the station point. So again, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the station point. The station point is where you are the viewer in relationship to the object. And if we lock it, you'll notice that now I can rotate my grid around like so. And that can be kind of cool. It sets it up pretty much It's a default 45-degree 2-point perspective. But in architecture back in the day, 45 is kind of boring because it's the same on both sides. It's symmetrical. But instead, if you wanted a 30-60, this is a little bit more dynamic. And then we could, move the whole grid over a little bit. That would probably be a little bit more interesting viewpoint. And if you want to, you can extend, or you can, depends on how much of this grid is only for measurements. And again, if I, can pull that down like so. But let's say I wanted to go ahead and make a grid along the top. If I select this and I select the rectangle tool, I click and I drag like so. See here at the top of the plane of my box. And then I could go ahead and select this one. And then we could select a different color here. Okay. Let's see what other questions we have here. So does that help you, Susie? So for certain things, it can be useful. But again, it's something that they haven't deprecated it from the program, and I hope they never would. But it would just be adding another lesson for the book.
Professor, do you mind switching the interpreters again? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Hold on here. So we're going back. Wait a minute. Who are we going back to?
To Bernice.
Back to Bernice?
Yes, please.
Okay. 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 So, yeah, that's it. That's some of the things that we've already covered, but extending it just a little bit more. We could always go into much greater detail. But I'm just kind of doing this shotgun approach on the fly, adding features that maybe you find interesting and can use. And, I was talking about that architectural detail. This would be something that you could do. What it would be interesting is if you started with a background as a photograph, and then you use this tool to try to match the perspective of the one in the photograph, and then you could draw elements on top of it that would match the perspective. Okay. So before you guys take off today, let me write down who's here. We have Deborah. And we have, let's see, Emily. And we have Malik. And we have Susie Gonzalez. And we have Vanessa Perea. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now. And then that's it. I'll just